before going to our lecture, I want to introduce our Ustaz, Professor Dr. Asad Zaman, with you. Professor Dr. Asad Zaman is a prominent Islamic scholar and thinker and economist. He is a professor in economics and social scientist. Previously, he has served as Vice Chancellor of the Pakistan Institute of Development Economics, and he is the member of the Economic Advisory Committee to the Prime Minister and Director General of International Institute of Islamic Economics. He earned his PhD in economics from Stanford University in 1978, and he earned his MSc in statistics from Stanford University, and he completed his bachelor in mathematics from MIT, that means Massachusetts Institute of Technology, in 1974. He is also the editor of International Economic Review, and he has so many books and publications. Most important them are econometric application of high breakdown reversed regression techniques, Islamic economics, a survey of the literature, Islam versus economics, the crisis of Islamic economics, the normative foundations of scarcity, and so on. Now I am requesting our honorable guest, Professor Dr. Asad Zaman, for giving his presentations or his speech in this topic. And our topic is a new methodology to Islamic economics. We are waiting, Ustaz.
I haven't muted. Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. I have a lot of material to cover, and so I will not pause for formalities and get started. One thing to understand is that the economics cannot be studied in isolation. That we have to look at the whole economics, politics, society, environment. Everything must be done together. This idea that we can study economics in isolation is faulty. So now I'm going to share my slides. Yes, I've got it.
Yes, sir, you can.
Yeah, okay. I am. Okay, so are we, is my screen visible now?
Yes, we can
okay.
see.
All right, so we are going to discuss a new methodology for Islamic economics, but we must start from the basics. And if you want to study Islamic economics, you have to start with Islam. So what is Islam? The first wahi says that Islam is a religion of knowledge, because it starts with the imperative to read, and it goes on to say that Allah Ta'ala taught mankind what they did not know. So this is all about knowledge. So what was this knowledge given by God to humanity? And Islam is unique in emphasizing the importance of knowledge. The blood, the ink of the scholars is just as precious or more than the blood of the martyrs. So knowledge is given central importance in Islam. So what was the knowledge that Allah Ta'ala gave to mankind which they did not know? Allah Ta'ala himself says that this is the greatest gift of man, of God to mankind. And so, and what is this? It says that Allah Ta'ala has explained everything, and the book is guidance and mercy. And Allah Ta'ala also says that those who believe, will be brought out from the darkness into the light. So this message of God includes knowledge about how to build an ideal society, and this covers economics, politics, social institutions, educational institutions, environmental policy. Everything is covered in Islam. So Islamic economics, briefly speaking, is the information that God gave us about how to build an economic system which creates just outcomes which are pleasing to Allah. So this is the definition of Islamic economics, but you will not find it in any textbook of Islamic economics written today. So before we go on to talk about Islamic economics, let us go back to think about what was the effect of this knowledge which God gave to mankind. So basically, just as Allah Ta'ala said, it brought light into a dark world. And the best place to read this is to look at this article, this book, The Rise and Decline of Muslims and Its Effect on Mankind. I have given a short summary of this in a blog post which is linked here. But basically, the Bedouin, who were the most ignorant and backward people on the planet, they became the leaders of the world, and the Islamic civilization enlightened the world with knowledge for 1,000 years, for more than 1,000 years. So the question is, this was a very powerful knowledge. What happened to this knowledge? So this, we can think, is the greatest puzzle in the history of mankind. What happened to this knowledge? Did it disappear? Or maybe does it still have revolutionary power? The main goal of this lecture is to convey the idea that the message that God gave to mankind is still just as powerful, just as revolutionary as it was 1400 years ago. Now, the non-Muslims say that no, Islam was great for its time. Non-Muslims acknowledge the power of the message of Islam, but they say it was good for its own time, but now it's obsolete. Unfortunately, Muslims also agree. Most Muslims say that today the Quran has little or nothing to offer us today. If we want to develop, we have to learn from the West. We have to get their science, we have to get their technology, we have to get their governance models, we have to learn how to free our societies from corruption. Everything we do, we must follow the prescriptions of the IMF, and we must learn to be like the West in order to develop. So Quran has nothing to offer us today. So there is a very big problem created by this, that the complete and perfect guidance which Allah Ta'ala gave to the world is now obsolete. In fact, the Quran says that in this bounty of God and His mercy, which is the Quran, let the Muslims rejoice, because it is better than everything which the non-believers can gather. It is almost axiomatic that knowledge that Allah Ta'ala gave us must be better than any knowledge which any human being can gather. It's almost axiomatic. But even though our faith requires us to believe this, our head, our minds, our eyes show the exact opposite. Today, in universities all over the world, only Western knowledge is being taught. There is no mention of Quran, Sunnah, and even the entire 1,000-year-old intellectual tradition of the Islamic civilization. It has vanished without a trace. If there was anything useful in our intellectual heritage, it has all been absorbed by the West, and it has been incorporated in their knowledge. And of course, there's a most powerful evidence that if the Quran had valuable guidance to offer, would the Muslims today be so ignorant and backward as we are? So everything points to the failure of the Quran, that the Quran is no longer relevant, it is obsolete. Now, I would like to say that there is no easy solution to this conflict between the head and the heart. That this is the central conflict that we Muslims face, and we must resolve it. But don't think that this is easy. It is possible, but it is not easy. So, Allah Ta'ala has promised that to lead the believers out of darkness into the light, and also the non-believers will be led into the darkness. But we see the exact opposite, that the West has all the knowledge and the Muslims are in darkness and ignorance. So again, there is something very wrong here. The Quran is saying something which is contrary to what our eyes are showing us. So what is the solution? Well, to begin with, we have to have iman, and we have to have taqwa, and we have to have trust. So Allah Ta'ala says that man kana yu'minu billahi wal yawmil akhir wa man yattaqillaha jal makhraja. I think this ayat has been mixed up because of the word problem, which reformats the Arabic. So no, I think it's okay. Anyway, Allah Ta'ala has promised those who believe to and those who have taqwa to provide them with rizq from where they cannot calculate. And if they trust Allah, then Allah Ta'ala will be enough for them. And Allah Ta'ala is all powerful, and He can change the future of the world. So we need to know how to understand that the Quran offers us complete and perfect guidance today, when it seems like we are lacking in everything. We need to consult Western experts in economics, in politics, in building society, in environmental affairs. And all the universities around the world are teaching these using textbooks of the West. And Muslims have no solutions to offer. Muslims are not there in the battleground. So it seems that the God's message to mankind has become obsolete and irrelevant. So to tackle this problem, we have to begin at the very beginning. What is the most important knowledge for any human being to have? I think that we will agree that our life is very short, and learning how to live is the most important question that we all have. We have a very small amount of time on this earth. Death will end it, and we must learn how to use this time in the best possible way. And to do that, we need to know what is the purpose of our lives. So we must ask, does a Western education offer any answers to these questions? Can we learn how to live by studying chemistry, biology, physics, mathematics, economics, political science? As anything, all of us have been educated by a Western education. So did that teach us how to develop our inner potential? The Quran tells us that every human life is worth the same as all of humanity. Your life and my life is worth 7 billion lives. This is a very strange equation. So can we develop this potential within us? Like the seed can become a tree, and the tree can produce seeds to become a forest if the capabilities are developed. Just so, if a human being develops his capabilities, he can change the world. But does the university education teach us how to do this? It's obvious that this is not true. But why not? Why does a modern university education not address the central questions that we human beings face? It should be obvious. I can tell from my personal experience that when I was a freshman at MIT, all of us wanted to know how to live. What is the best use we should make of our lives? We were young teenagers, and we wanted the answers to the question. But we asked our professors, and they had no answers for us. Why does a modern university education fail to develop the character of a human being? And this leads to dramatically inferior life experience. If we don't know how to behave towards others, then we will have very poor lives. And this happens. You can look at the harmful effects of the education, which develops technical skills, but no life skills. So if you are students of economics, you will have read that life is a jungle of cutthroat competition. The goal of life is to maximize pleasure, regardless of what happens to others. You can hurt thousands of people. You are only after your own personal pleasure. The goal of marriage is to get pleasure now. This is what Hollywood is teaching, not to raise a family. Because of this, more than 50% of the children in the USA are born to single mothers. They fail to experience the warmth and security of a home with love of father and mother. Individualism, which is taught in economics and in social sciences, leads to loneliness. You don't make friends with anybody. And studies show that long-term happiness comes from social relationships and from character. But neither of these essential elements for our lives is taught in the Western education. So the most important things to learn are not part of a Western education. Why did this happen and how did this happen? For this, there is a very interesting book by Harvard professor Julie Rubin. She writes about the making of the modern university. This is the title of the book, Intellectual Transformation and Marginalization of Morality. And she says that if you look at the college catalogs of the early 20th century, you will see that the goal of a university education was to build character, to create leaders, to teach civic and social responsibility to their students. But today, if you look at catalogs, none of them mention anything like this. The moral mission has been abandoned, and the universities are teaching purely technical skills. And the results of this failure to teach people how to be human beings has been disastrous. Now the universities are producing moral midgets. They know nothing about morality. They do cost-benefit calculations on human lives. The inventor of the atom bomb was called to the Congress and asked to describe what would happen. So he described the color and light show that would happen. Somebody asked him, well, what will happen to the human beings? Oh, he said that they will all die. I mean, the deaths of the innocent men, women, and children in the city was just peripheral importance. There's a book called The Best and the Brightest, which mentions how graduates of Yale, like McNamara, callously killed millions of Vietnamese citizens, civilians. They just didn't think that their lives are worth anything. So this is a civilization where they say that killing 500,000 children is okay in order to gain control over Iraqi oil. This is what the Western education, this is the monsters that are being produced by Western education. People with no integrity, honesty. There's a very recent cheating scandal at Harvard. There was an article in Time magazine about how we are a nation of liars. Everybody tells lies whenever it is profitable, useful to do so. And this is what economics also teaches, that if you have studied The Prisoner's Dilemma, you know that you can make a promise to the other person that, yes, I will cooperate, but you should follow your self-interest and betray. What we are taught about society is that this is a cutthroat competition in a ruthless jungle, and the survival of the fittest is the only law. There is a YouTube video with millions of views. Michael Sandel, he's teaching 1,000 undergraduates at Harvard, freshmen, about justice. What is the right thing to do? And what does he teach them? He teaches them moral relativity. He says that if you have to kill 3 people and you have to kill 10 people, what should you do? Killing is necessary. I mean, you just have to choose whether to kill less or to kill less more or to kill more. And this kind of relativistic, there's no absolute morals. It is not wrong to kill. Sandel recognizes that what he is teaching is actually dangerous and damaging to the character of the students. And in the beginning of the lecture, he says that this course will not make you a better person. So all of these are epiphenomena. These are surface phenomena. What is underlying is a deep fact. It has to do with philosophy, epistemology, the theory of knowledge. What happened was a dramatic change in this theory of knowledge. There is an interesting Wikipedia article called Getting to Philosophy. And what it says is that take any article. Wikipedia contains basically all knowledge. And if you look at any article in Wikipedia and click on the first link, first internal link, which goes to another Wikipedia article, then just repeat this process. Click on the first link, which goes to another Wikipedia article. Eventually, you will end up with an article in philosophy. What this shows is that the entire structure of knowledge is built on philosophical foundations. Philosophers provide the answers to this fundamental question, what is knowledge? And the answer changed dramatically in early 20th century. And the driver of this change was logical positivism. So this is the philosophy we need to understand if we want to understand the basis and foundation of Western education, and also how we need to change this education to recreate an Islamic approach to knowledge, which is essential to the future of the Ummah. So there is an article I have written, which has linked here. And very roughly speaking, there was a century of deadly warfare between Catholics and Protestants. And this led to rejection of Christianity as a source of knowledge in the West. Basically, they saw that Christianity just leads to fighting. So they said that, okay, we must rebuild our social sciences, how to behave as a society, how to do international relations, how to do economics, how to do politics. We cannot use the Bible as a basis because it leads to war. So once you reject the Bible as a source of knowledge, then you need to rebuild knowledge on new foundations starting from zero. So if you remember your philosophy, Descartes, the famous, I think, therefore I am, why should one need to establish my own existence? I mean, that's so fundamental that you don't need to prove it. But Descartes is faced with the problem of building knowledge starting from zero because you have rejected the Bible. So this is the so this was the project of all the Enlightenment philosophers. They were all talking about the theory of knowledge, and basically there were two schools of thought. One is that knowledge comes from observations, and the other is that knowledge comes from logic. So this is empiricism and rationalism. Both of them have their advantages and defects. And it's not my goal to go into this in depth. But basically, in early 20th century, a synthesis was made of these positions. And this was called logical positivism. And the key assertion of LP is that all knowledge comes from observations and logic. And so if you have a sentence which cannot be supported by observations and logic and cannot be opposed by observations and logic, then it is meaningless. This leads to the immediate conclusion that moral values are meaningless. For example, if we look at the biblical commandment that it is wrong to kill innocents, how can you prove this empirically? What are the observations which will support? What were the observations which will disconfirm? There aren't any. So basically, there are no more moral values. So lessons about morality cannot be true or false. They are just meaningless. So this automatically means that half of the Quran at least is meaningless. On the other hand, science consists of facts which are created from observations and logic. And basically, logical positivists said that only science provides valid knowledge and religion is just meaningless superstition. Now, education is driven by epistemology. Education provides knowledge to students. So if you have a theory of knowledge which says that science is only knowledge, and everything else is not knowledge, then this will no longer be taught in an education. So character, morals, social responsibility, they were no longer part of human knowledge according to the positivists. So these were removed from the college curricula, and science and technology became the sole objects of knowledge, and university education was transformed. Only technical education, no character building. And this is still going on today. Okay, so that's what happened in the West. But why did the Islamic world accept this toxic epistemology, which denies the status of knowledge to the Quran? Today, if you take a Western education, it will say that the Quran is not knowledge. It is just something else. So basically, just 1 second. Very good step. So basically, we have to go back to the colonization is a conquest of minds. 1,000 Englishmen cannot control millions of Indians. So they have to make them wish to obey the colonizer. Otherwise, it would be impossible. Even at the height of the English Empire, there were only 1,000 Englishmen in the bureaucracy, which were in control of India. So the way to accomplish this is to make the colonized want to obey. And this is accomplished by an educational system which produces the coconut class, which is brown on the outside and white on the inside. Macaulay's famous minute on education says that the goal of our educational system will be to create a class of people who will admire our culture, knowledge, and values, and have hatred and contempt for their own people, heritage, culture, history, and civilization. And that was the goal of our educational system. And this system is exactly the same today. It creates exactly the same effect. So one very excellent illustration of the Macaulay's children produced by this education is Salman Rushdie. His 3 novels, Shame, he expresses contempt and hatred for his own family and culture. Midnight's Children expresses contempt and hatred for his own nation and his own people. And Satanic Verses expresses contempt and hatred for his own religion and history. And he has married at least 3 white women, showing his desire to be accepted into the European culture. So this is the effect of a Western education. So, but we can say that colonization ended after World War II, so rough sometime. So this problem should have stopped, but that's not true, because the colonization of minds is created by a Western education, and the Western educational system is going just as strong, even stronger today, all over the Islamic world. Today, the great divide within our country, in our countries, is between those people who speak English and those who don't know how to speak English. So the coconut class is identified by its ability to speak English fluently, natively. Their children are taught English from birth. The vernacular class, they speak the vernacular languages, and they either cannot speak English at all, or they speak broken and bad English. Remember that the colonial political, economic, judicial, educational, army, police, social structures had only one purpose, and this was to extract revenue from the population. Today, the coconut class, which replaced the English colonizers, it maintains these same colonized institutions, and it extracts the same revenue, but it does so for itself rather than sending it abroad. the army, the landlords, the political elites are supported by foreign aid which goes into their pockets. And in return for these salaries, they extract revenue from the population and send it abroad as interest payments in return for support to keep them in power. So this is how colonization is continuing today. For this talk, what is relevant is that educational systems propagate Western epistemology. Logical positivism says that what cannot be observed does not exist. So there is no God, no afterlife, no day of judgment. And this leads to the conclusion that we must maximize pleasure in this world. And this is what is taught explicitly in economics. And unfortunately, even Islamic economists have not rejected this axiom. So once we realize that the education system is all about this world only, and the goal of education becomes to enable students to get jobs and to earn money. And in a capitalist world, jobs depend on Western education. Students learn to believe that only Western knowledge is important because that is all that is taught in universities, and that is what gets them jobs. Students learn to believe from a Western education that Quran, Sunnah, Islamic intellectual heritage is irrelevant because no mention of this is made in a modern education, which doesn't concern the purpose of our lives. It doesn't discuss this. It automatically teaches us that the purpose of our lives is to make money. So we end up believing that Western knowledge is superior to the Quran. Today, a Western education teaches us all to value life on this earth. Economics teaches explicitly that we have to pursue pleasure. And in politics, we learn to pursue power. And in business, we learn to pursue profits. And all of this means that we reject God, afterlife, day of judgment, and to make wealth the goal of our life. And within this intellectual framework, the Quran and the Sunnah and the intellectual heritage of the Muslims, it appears irrelevant, obsolete. Quran is not going to teach us how to make the maximum amount of money and how to pursue pleasure on this planet. So this is actually the central spiritual problem, that we think, Muslims think, that man-created knowledge by the West is superior to the word of God. So how can we solve this problem? The first step is to overcome the dazzle of Western knowledge and realize that beneath that sparkling cover, the internal is hollow and toxic. So some of the key distinctions that is made by Western philosophers is objective knowledge and subjective knowledge, science versus religion, facts versus values, observations and logic versus intuitions and spiritual knowledge. These are all false dichotomies. The world does not work like this, but we are trained to believe in these dichotomies, and they make it very hard to see the truth. To see through this illusion, we must focus on the purpose of our lives. This is the central question for all human beings. There are three positions which are possible we can take. One is atheism, there is no God. The other is agnosticism. We do not know, or we cannot know whether or not God exists. And then there's deism, God exists. None of these three positions is value-free. All of them are value-laden. So there is no value-free position that is possible. So what the West teaches us, that there is objective value-free knowledge, this is a false idea. This is an error at the heart of Western intellectual tradition. So let's take these three separately. Consider the atheism branch. So we reject God, afterlife, day of judgment. Universe was created by accident. There is no meaning to our lives. Everything is chaotic. We can choose whatever purpose we want. This leads to existentialism. We create meaning, whatever meaning can be found. This is one branch that we can take, that we try to create meaning. Then there is absurdism, that no meaning is possible, but we can keep it meaningless, and we can take pleasure in chaos, in a meaningless life. Or we have nihilism, that which Albert Camus says that the only serious philosophical question is suicide. Are meaningless lives even worth living? So even if we take the path of atheism, it becomes of central importance to discuss and reflect on the implications of atheism and what are the consequences and what are the alternatives to atheism. But regardless of what you do, you're going to introduce values into your knowledge. You're going to prioritize knowledge according to which of these options you choose. Agnosticism is about we don't know if God exists. All right, then the most important question becomes to find out if God exists or not. We must focus our efforts on finding the answer, because it will determine how we should live. And there are methods which have been given by all factions. So the atheists have lots of arguments that show that God does not exist. The deists have lots of arguments which prove that God exists. And agnostics also have arguments to show that it's impossible to know or find out whether God exists, and also that we can live without God, even whether he exists or not is irrelevant. So all of these are arguments, but for an agnostic person, you must study all of these arguments and compare them and evaluate them and come to a decision. You can't live in suspense about this, but this is not done in modern education. Modern education doesn't deal with this question at all. So finally, the third option is that God exists. If God exists, then God created the universe. And so he had a purpose. We must find out this purpose. He also created us for a purpose. So we must find out this purpose, and we must live according to that purpose in order to be successful on the day of judgment. So the point that I want to make is that you can only choose one of these three options, but none of the options is objective and value-free. All of them have their own set of values. So the Western idea that there is some objective value-free knowledge, this is false. So atheists must seek knowledge for power, pleasure, and profits. And this is exactly what Western social science is all about and economics is all about. Agnostics must seek knowledge to learn about God existence. And this is represented by the dua of Ibrahim alayhi salam, that you ask Allah for guidance to tell us if he exists and to give this faith in our hearts. And if you believe that God exists, then you have to search among the religions to find which one is true. I'm not going to focus on this area, and I'm going to assume that since we are all Muslims, we have made this search and we have come to a conclusion that Islam is the right religion. And in that case, we must seek knowledge for success on the day of judgment. So the central battleground is that of knowledge. The message of God begins with read and goes on to promise that God will reveal an extraordinarily powerful knowledge to human beings. And this knowledge actually revolutionized the world. But it seems that it has lost its power today because the Muslims are backwards and ignorant. So this is not true. But to prove that this is not true, we need to enter the battlefield of knowledge and show that Western knowledge is inferior and provide a superior alternative on the basis of the Quran and the Sunnah. And this has not been done. And this is what needs to be done urgently. So how can this be done? Well, I have given 3 steps in the Ghazali Project, because basically Imam Ghazali encountered exactly the same problem. In his time, the Mu'tazila said that the Greek philosophy was equally as solid, as valid as the Quran and the Sunnah as a source for knowledge. So Imam Ghazali starts with deliverance from doubt. Al-Munqidh min al-Dalala is one of his books. He says that we have to build faith in God, and this cannot be you cannot achieve faith by reason and logic. It has to come from the illumination of the heart. You have to have your heart filled with the nur of Allah in order to arrive at knowledge. So the second step is Tahafatul Philosopher, which basically is learning that even though Western knowledge appears to be very spectacular, very brilliant, very amazing, this is just the shine on the surface. If you look inside, then you see that it's all rotten. The core is rotten. And so the third step is to rebuild the knowledge on the foundations of the Quran and Sunnah. And this involves rebuilding all of the social sciences, the economics, the politics, social institutions, environmental, educational, judicial, all aspects of society have to be rebuilt on Islamic foundations. And this is the goal of the Ghazali Project linked here. So some resources on how we can do this. I have listed these articles. Each of these, these are actually my articles. There are a lot of other people also working on this, among which the most important school of thought is a school of thought on Islamic psychology. They have made a lot of development on the basis of an Islamic model of human beings, which means looking at the qalb, the nafs, the ruh, and the aql. All these are 4 dimensions. So this leads to a very different view of psychology from the Western view. And so and it is very powerful in terms of its clinical applicability to curing people of psychological disease. So that is something I have not mentioned because, but anyway, so covering to we have to rebuild the entire social sciences because the social sciences are built on the historical experience of European societies. And this experience is not applicable to Islamic societies. So because the social science that the West has developed is based on their own experience, and they have wrongly said that this applies to the whole world. It does not. So we have to build our own social science based on our own historical experiences and our theoretical foundations in the Quran. And how we might do that is discussed in this article of mine called Ulumul Umran. Again, when we think about our financial institutions today, we are doing copycat financial institutions, taking Western financial institutions and trying to find Islamic versions of those. But actually what we need to do is reject these institutions and rebuild different kinds of institutions. And how to do that is discussed in this article. And similarly, the theory of money that economics teaches is completely fallacious and faulty and leads to a very wrong approach to monetary policy, and how we can rethink money in Islamic terms and create a new approach to monetary policy is discussed in this article, which is linked here. On a more broad basis, how we can revive the Islamic civilization. This involves basically the Ghazali Project, but I have 10 lectures in this on the foundations you need to understand the Ghazali Project. Now, one illustration of the Ghazali Project is a book that I'm writing, which is called Real Statistics, a Radical Approach. And in this book, I have shown that for 100 years, Western statisticians have built on foundations created by Sir Ronald Fisher. But these foundations are wrong because Sir Ronald Fisher created it on positivist foundations. And so there are many, so basically there are 2 key concepts in statistics. One of them is probability and one of them is causality. And neither of these is observable. Probability is not observable because when you flip a coin, it comes out heads, but it could have come out tails. This is what probability says. But this, it could have happened otherwise, is not observable. So that is why the frequency theory is very stupid and wrong theory. And similarly, the Bayesian theory is also quite wrong, because both of them are trying to find uh, observable versions of probability, but probability is inherently unobservable. Similarly, causality is also inherently unobservable. And so statistics, the conventional statistics cannot give a correct definition of causality. So if we change probability and if we change causality, we get a completely different approach to statistics, which is what I have developed. So again, this is showing how Islamic foundations allow us to rebuild the entire structure of Western knowledge on new foundations. And this makes the knowledge also new. This has implications for artificial intelligence, for machine learning, for everything. All of these are currently being done on the wrong foundations, on the wrong axioms, on the wrong assumptions. I am also about to launch or publish a new book on Islamic economics called Islamic Economics, the Polar Opposite of Capitalist Economics. If you look at current textbooks, two of them were published 2 or 3 years ago, one of them by Islamic University of Malaysia and the other by International Islamic University of Islamabad. Both of them are compromises. Both of them are based on the thought that capitalist economics with minor modifications can become Islamic economics. And this is really the wrong approach. In order to build a genuine Islamic economics, you have to reject capitalist economics as being all wrong and then rebuild Islamic economics on new foundations. And this is what my books and articles show. So we can conclude here by a summary. The structures of Western knowledge created over the past few centuries have been built on toxic foundations based on the rejection of God, afterlife, and the day of judgment. We need to rebuild all of this knowledge on Islamic moral foundations. The Islamization of Knowledge project made a start on this, but it got bogged down due to over-reliance on Western intellectual heritage. Instead of rejecting Western economics and rebuilding on the foundations of the Quran, they said, okay, let's start with what the West has. We'd have no need to rebuild the wheel. They have already done a lot of work. So let's take this work. The knowledge is the lost property of the believers. So if the West has knowledge, we should not reject it. This is the kind of arguments that were made. But the point is that if the West is not knowledge, it is jahalat, then we must reject it. And the Muslim economists generally failed to see that what the West has is jahalat and not knowledge. They said, this is knowledge, we must adopt it, we must learn from their mathematics, we must learn from their economics. When we do that, then nothing is left of Islam, because all of that knowledge is built on foundations, atheist foundations, which say that we must maximize the pleasure that we get on this earth. And this is in direct conflict with Islamic teachings. So we can end this with a dua. Inna salati wa nusuki wa mahyaya wa mati lillahi rabbil alameen wa Allah ta'ala. Let my worship and my struggle and my living and my dying be solely for your sake. O Allah ta'ala, accept our prayers and fill our hearts with the nur of guidance and lead us out of the darkness into the light. Ameen ya Rabbil Alameen.
Thank you very much for your valuable presentation. Inshallah, we hope that our young generations and our audience who are participated in this conference will be able to rescue our academia and our education system from this logical positivist approach and from Western academia. And we'll be able to build a new world order where justice and truth will be prevailed. And now I am going to our question and answer session. First question, I'm requesting Brother Abdurrahman Zami to ask his question to our Ustaz Asad Zaman.
Assalamu alaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay, thank you so much for this valuable lecture. And I have heard a lot of things that is from the bottom of my heart. And what the thing that I have think all the time, and my question is that I am studying in the University of Chittagong, which is a renowned university in Bangladesh, and the department of mine is Islamic Studies. For that course, we
What
also
study? What
read
department?
Islamic economics.
Oh
And
yes,
when I
yes.
talk to our syllabus and when our professors are come to teach us, they always try to a dimension of Islamization. They want to try capitalism to make Islamic capitalization. They want to make the what can I say the communist economics to make Islamization, and everyone is walking through that way that we have to make everything Islamization, and that is creating a big problem. And my question is that if you want to change, if a group like us want to change that way, there is, I think, if there is two ways. One is to sit on that chair that we can change. If we sit on the high chair of this country, of the Asian government country, that we can change, that we have power, we can change with our knowledge the whole thing. And or if we can't sit there, if we don't have the ability, if we spread a vibe, and if we spread knowledge by our article, by our knowledge, by our books, if if they're able to take that knowledge and they will change to that revelation actually. And the third question is, if we cannot do these two things, or if anytime Allah gives us the ability to sit on the chair and to make the power, and if we reject their education, because that whole thing is related to education, if we reject their education, they will make a war with us. That they will reject everything. They will give us sanction, everything just like this. I'm very sorry for that. That my question is become so big. Thank you, Ustaz.
Yes. No, this is a very excellent question and very important. Um, this has to do with the strategy. We are trying to create a revolution in knowledge. And launching a revolution is never easy because you are going to be opposed by those who have power. Because knowledge is power. So if you want to, knowledge structures support current power. So if you try to make a revolution in Islamic economics, your biggest opponents will be the Islamic economists. And so there is this famous physicist, Max Planck. He was trying to make a revolution. He invented quantum theory, and he was trying to make a revolution in physics. Einstein opposed him, and everybody else opposed him. And so basically, after trying to convince people, he said this beautiful thing that physics advances one funeral at a time. When these oldies will die, then we will get new. So also, I have been saying this message for 20 years that we need to throw away conventional economics. And people say that it is his beard speaking, because he is just full of faith in Islam, so he is just rejecting the realities of life. And of course, we cannot reject all of capitalism. It is so powerful and so wonderful. There's so much mathematics and computers. It looks very glorious. So my advice, very practical for students like you who are studying Islamic economics: don't make waves. Get your degree to the best extent possible. Because if you try to say things like me, and I have experienced my students, some of them, they started to get very revolutionary, and they said that all of the conventional theory is wrong, and since at the defense everybody sitting was believer in it, so they got shot down. So don't make waves. Yeah, PhD is just a piece of paper. People think that getting a PhD involves making a contribution to knowledge. No, it is not. It is just a piece of paper. Get it in the easiest possible way. Don't pay too much. Don't put in too much effort into writing a revolutionary thesis. Just do something minimal, routine. Just get that piece of paper, then you can launch your revolution. So that is one thing. So the other thing is that I've been trying to convince the elders of the field. No one listens. But the youth is very, very interested. And this is exactly what Thomas Kuhn has also said about the structure of scientific revolutions. That when a scientific revolution comes about, the existing people who believe in the old paradigm, they never convert. The revolutions don't happen by conversions. It happens when the young people who have a fresh career in front of them, they see that these new ideas will give them massive opportunities for research. And this is really true. I mean, if you want to do a research in economics, what you're going to do, you're going to take an article in American Economic Review, and where it mentions interest, you're going to cross that out and you're going to put in musharka. And that's your thesis. And there's nothing more than that, nothing more you can do, because they are so far ahead that if you try to actually genuinely innovate, you can do some very tough mathematics, but you will end up being a follower of the new classical tradition. But if you take my ideas, then everything is open. You are at ground zero. Nothing is known about economics. You see, modern economics is built on foundations of competition, utility maximization, which is greed, and individualism and hedonism. So we say, how would we build a society built on generosity, which is preached in the Quran, cooperation, which the Quran teaches us, social responsibility, we have to take care of each other, farz kifaya, and on seeking, instead of maximizing pleasure in this dunya, maximize the pleasure of the akhirah, which means that you seek success on the day of judgment. And so Allah Ta'ala says, "Lan tanalul birra hatta tunfiqu mimma tuhibbun." You take your most precious thing, the one that you like the most, and you give it away. So this is actually minimizing your utility. Your nafs will be very much hurt by this. And so this is what you need to train the nafs. So instead of maximizing, you minimize utility. So everything is different. And if you say, okay, these are my principles, how am I going to build an economic system? So everything is new. And in any area of economics you choose, you can do new research. And it will be very different. It will be very new. It will be very radical. So the opportunities are infinite. And I have shown many students who have done PhDs with me. So basically, you have to pick a very careful path. Today, there are pathways open because, lots of people have challenged. So since the 1970s, Islamic economists have been trying to build this discipline, and they have gotten nowhere. There is zero progress. As opposed to this, since the 70s, we have had the emergence of behavioral economics, of the environmental economics, of chaos theory and agent-based modeling. So many different heterodox schools, the modern monetary theory, have come up and emerged and become established and have challenged successfully orthodoxy. But Islamic economics has not. They are just blind imitators. So actually, Islamic economics has more revolutionary power than all of the heterodoxy combined. But if we become imitators, we cannot possibly do something new. But if we become challengers of the orthodoxy, then there is a lot of open frontiers open for us. The whole world is new. So this is very exciting for young people who have their careers in front of them. They can conquer the world. So that is how I see. Knowledge is very powerful. Allah Ta'ala gave this knowledge to the Bedouin and they conquered the world. Today, the knowledge has exactly the same power. But the Muslims, instead of looking to the Quran for guidance, they're looking to the West for guidance. And that is the biggest problem. Yes. Next question.
Okay, thank you, Ustaz. Next question is from our brother Mushfiqur Rahman.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. Honorable Ustaz, thank you so very much for being with us here today. Ustaz, Ustad, I have some points to know about. Like, if the world power occupying from Islam to capitalism would be the principal point here from maybe 300 or 400 years ago, or other words, after the heinous British colonial period here in the subcontinent, Indian subcontinent, for example, or over the globes alike. So, I mean, who had the glorious social and economic position like Mughal here, and all those countries are burdened with debt today by the trap of IMF or I think World Bank. That's why they can't be able to make alliance with other Muslim countries for economic or other sides. So what might be the solution here? And my second point is, how is the Organization of Developing Aid, I mean D8, for this time to revive the whole Ummah? And my last point is, as you alluded your lecture, that we should rebuild the whole Ummah by getting approach with Quran and Sunnah. And my perspective is here, there is no more thousands of institutions here in Indian subcontinent only. They have been researching, come through this crucial point by Quran and Sunnah, but there is no outcome and there is no solution. So what should be the exact way to revive through Quran and Sunnah? Thank you, teacher.
All right. So there is your good question. You have talked about the theoretical problems and the practical problems. So in terms of the practical problems, our enslavement by interest-based loans is actually a failure of knowledge. They have taught us a wrong economic theory, which tells us that to progress we must take loans. And this is actually the exact opposite of truth. We need to build self-sufficient economies where we don't need to borrow anything from anybody. But economic theory teaches us the opposite. It says that comparative advantage holds, so you should do your own comparative advantage, and you should import things which others have comparative advantage on. This is completely wrong. Our goal should be to build self-sufficient economies. But until we believe this wrong economic theory, we will continue to be enslaved because we will import things and we will need loans to import them. And then we will have the IMF as our lender, and it will dictate their terms to us. But in order to escape this trap, we need to rebuild the knowledge base, because we have it's actually the wrong economic theories which are enslaving us. So that is one part. The other part is that so pragmatically we need to build self-sufficient economies. On the theoretical side, the key problem is social science. The word science in social science is a deception, because when you use that word, it seems as if the social science is just like the physical science. So if you have the law of gravity, we're not going to develop an Islamic law of gravity. We're just going to use the same law of gravity. It holds exactly the same in the Islamic world, and it also holds the same in the Europe. But what about the law of supply and demand? Now, the word of law suggests that this is the same is true, but this is not true. The law of supply and demand is not a law like the physics law. It is actually quite wrong. The law of supply and demand is a theory about how prices are formed. And this theory is a wrong theory. It's a false theory. And all of economics is built on this false theory. And so we have to reject it. We have to have a correct understanding of what economics is and how to do economics. And so this requires seeing through the hoax of Western social science. It is not a science. It is actually some lessons extracted from the European historical experience. So obviously, European historical experience does not apply to African societies. It doesn't apply to Chinese societies. It doesn't apply to Latin America. Doesn't apply to Islamic civilization. Then how come they say that this is a science? It is universally applicable. Well, if you look at what their people have said, they say that, the Western society is the most advanced society on the planet. Everybody else is a child. It's a baby. So we are babies. When we grow up, we will become like the West. And so the laws of the Western civilization apply to everybody. This is just ridiculous nonsense. So we have to reject this, and we have to build our own social sciences on the basis of the Quran. Social sciences tell us how to do economics, how to do politics. Today, all over the Muslim world, we are saying, oh, we don't have democracy, we don't have free markets, we don't have this, that, and the other. Whatever the West praises, that is what we need. And also, that is what the Quran contains. This is a very stupid result of enslavement of minds and colonization. So the project of decolonization of knowledge is one of the things that we need to do. Unfortunately, many of the people who are trying to decolonize knowledge have also got caught in postmodern theoretical constructs. Not all of them, but some of them. So in rejecting the West, then you go to, okay, so capitalism, you want to get rid of capitalism, so okay, we go to the communist and the socialist and the heterodox theories. So that's not good. We want to build on the Quran, not choose among Western schools of thought. So I think so basically what we need to do is develop an alternative to Western social science, which will tell us, how did social science emerge? Social science emerged as a rejection of Christianity as a basis of organizing society. So actually social science is a deen. It is the deen which emerged to replace Christianity. Now we have our own deen. Our deen is the fiqh, which was developed by the scholars to tell us how to run our markets and how to run our educational systems and how to run our society, the politics, the international relations, everything is written in the books of fiqh. So actually our social science is already there in fiqh. We don't have to start from zero. We just have to learn how to apply this fiqh to modern problems. But nobody has done this. Unfortunately, our ulama are not sufficiently versed in modern world to combat the Western intellectuals on their own grounds. And this is what we need to do. Okay, so I think that.
Thank you, Ustaz. Now we have our last question. I am requesting Brother Mahmoud Hassan for asking his question.
Assalamu alaikum rahmatullah.
Wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullah.
New methodology for Islamic economics is always favorite topics for me. And I was enriched by your 30 minutes amazing presentation. Thank you. But I have a question, 3 questions basically. First, you have mentioned that psychological disease. Actually, who is affecting in psychological disease? And second question.
Can we just do it one at a time rather than sequentially, because I forget? So
you can.
I didn't mention psychology. I said that we have a spiritual disease. The spiritual disease comes from valuing the knowledge of the West over the value over our own intellectual heritage in the Quran and the Sunnah.
Second question is there any uniform process or uniform model and method to execute or to provide any government that our economic policy will follow, and like every loopholes of our laws and regulations we will provide? Why we will just naming that the Islamic economics? Why we are not saying that our economics is insub-based economics for all nations, not for Muslim, not for religion basis. And our religion, our economic should be for all, not Islamic economics. Why we are naming frequently Islamic economics?
Very good question. You see, it has to do with ontology. They believe in the West that God does not exist. After death, we will become dust. So then this life is a jungle. So everyone should do whatever he can for himself. He does not care what happens to the future. He doesn't care what happens to the children. The private property he can do with what he wants. It is not an amana to be preserved and protected and to be passed on to the future generations. So your life is to maximize your pleasure without any concern for others. The utility function is a function of what you consume. It doesn't have anything which says that you should care about other people. This is based on the rejection of God, afterlife, judgment. Islamic economics says that success will be on the day of judgment. So we should cooperate, we should show generosity. So the fundamental principles of Islamic economics are different from those who reject God. So now, if you say that to the West that, okay, you reject God, but you should be generous, so they'll say, why? So why should we be generous? This life is a jungle. If I find the chance, I will cut your throat. If you find the chance, you will cut my throat. So this is how life is, and life is about the survival of the fittest. We are all animals produced by evolution. So if they don't believe in Islam, then they will not follow the principles of Islamic economics. So that's why Islamic economics can be only built in Muslim societies, which have a generally Islamic ethos and normative structure. Does that
Actually,
answer your question?
how much this is possible in the extent of the world, and how much it is possible, and religion-based economics, how much is possible?
Well, you see, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he came into the world. The Arabs were killing each other, and they were burying their own daughters, and they were in the period of Jahiliyyah. He changed them to such that the Sahaba were protecting the children of the birds. And a bird fell out of its nest. They were protecting the animals, and the Prophet ﷺ was rebuking them that you are exercising your camel, and it is complaining because you are giving it too much work to do. So creating compassion of the hearts was something that the Prophet ﷺ created, and he changed the society so that the people were looking after the needs of the others. The Quran mentions those people who feed others while they are themselves hungry. So this change was created by the Prophet, and it is our job to recreate this same change, this same transformation today using the powerful message of Islam.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ustaz.
Yes.
Ustaz, do you have time? We can take one more question if you give me permission.
Yes, until 8 o'clock we can, yes, go.
Okay. Brother Riaz Ahmed, please ask your question.
Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam.
First of all, let me give me some time to share my feelings. First of all, my question is,
I'd like to give a special thanks to our honorable guest, Professor Dr. Asad Zaman. It was really an informative program. I think many of us had learned something new, especially like me, and those who have already background of Islamic economics, they would have get some different views to do their researches and later. And obviously, as Ustaz said, that our academic researches, as we already know, that as we all are university level students, our academics are not giving us enough chance to study or do some researches in the proper way. So I hope we would be able to do some good researches for the prosperity of human life, for the freedom of the oppressed persons. So I'd like to thank everyone for attending, and I would like to invite our Ustaz again between us, inshallah. Maybe we'll be able to hear you again in some different topics later. Thank you very much, everyone.
Inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.
Jazakallah wa alaikum assalam wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.